Flies in the ointment, how distortions, discontinuities, and dissonance thwart cancel culture's promises. We're not criticizing the goals of diversity and inclusion. However, our survey study revealed many ways in which local cancel culture's characteristic beliefs and actions make it unlikely its lofty goals will be realized. Liberal activists promise a more diverse, inclusive, and stable society. However, due to fundamental flaws and inconsistencies in postmodernism, critical theories, intersectionality, and neo-socialism, cancel culture is unlikely to actually create these idyllic societies. Nonetheless, many colleges adopted cancel culture's woke-utopian perspective. Guidance from the Office of Civil Rights was often amplified as it was integrated into the rhetoric of college policies and programs. Administrators promised that the protection from hostile working and learning environments would extend academic freedom. However, there is an inherent tension between the exercise of academic freedom and prohibiting language that might be subjectively offensive. Therapists refer to false beliefs as distortions. They're not quite lies, but they're close. Several distortions and misconceptions about human nature and interaction underlie the theoretical perspectives on which cancel culture is built. Lukianoff and Haidt identify several distinct falsehoods as reasons social activists' good intentions have created a cancel culture that is undermining higher education. Here are the particular lies or distortions named by Lukianoff and Haidt as the origin of the negative consequences that have occurred with the awakening of organizations to a new but largely inaccurate understanding of how the world works. Turning from distortions to discontinuities, it's important to note that not all discontinuities are harmful. Distinctions between violations and non-violations, or between activities protected by academic freedom and those that would not be protected, are helpful. On the other hand, discontinuities among and between explicit beliefs, perceptions, and judgments are problematic, but all too often ignored. One source of discontinuities between our words and actions is the way we humans process information. We are not only dual-channel information processors. Over the last 40 years, cognitive scientists have discovered that we are multi-channel processors, and our control or even awareness of many of these processing activities is quite limited. Whether we are aware of such discontinuities, their presence is likely to lead to dissonance, often the cause of internal discomfort and great distress. Dissonance can occur within organizations as well as within individuals. Organizational justice is comprised of several equally important components: seeking to enforce distributive justice by adjusting procedures to favor certain groups while punishing others, and ignoring the need for transparency and institutional integrity is likely to have dire consequences for any college or university, as well as the individuals who become cancel culture's targets. No matter when or how they occur, dissonances create distress and require resolution, either by taking action to change the situation or altering perceptions or values. Unfortunately, adjusting perceptions and asserting separate realities are often easier than actually fixing the system. If you're not at least a little confused by all this, you haven't been listening. Unfortunately, the number of studies that rely on evidence rather than rhetorical arguments is limited. The number and type of relevant variables and potential ways to measure them is unclear. However, applying the principles and processes of psychological science is a place to start to reduce the confusion, clarify the issues, and understand the challenges we face. So this is an account of a local effort to begin this work. As Lee McIntyre suggests, the most important thing about science is not the method, but an attitude that encourages us to respect as well as collect empirical evidence and be willing to adjust our theories accordingly. Our study was a classroom activity designed to collect evidence relevant to the challenges students were experiencing on campus. It sought local and specific information about the dynamics of these issues at Berea College rather than generalizable knowledge. Several different types of variables were examined. 3 dichotomous demographic variables measured identity. Responses to direct questions about belief reflected respondents' explicit knowledge. Measuring implicit knowledge required an indirect approach. 20 hypothetical but realistic and ecologically valid scenarios asked about respondents' perceptions of hostile environments and judgments about academic freedom protection. Responses to these questions measured implicit knowledge. Here are some of the descriptive statistics. The demographic data were comparable to a previous survey conducted on the Berea campus by the University of Pennsylvania. Political identification showed a liberal bias. There was strong explicit support for the First Amendment, and our 3 indexes appeared to be reliable as shown by the high Cronbach's alphas. Here are a few more notes from our inspection of the initial results. Respondents explicitly claimed to support both the First Amendment and protection from hostile learning and work environments. Berea College appeared to be slightly less activist-oriented than the students in Villaseñor's 2017 survey. However, the fact that a greater proportion of Berea College students reported self-censoring than in his national survey was a cause for concern. One of the first analyses was a simple scattergram of the ratings of the scenarios as being hostile environment violations and whether the activists that created them would be protected by academic freedom. There were no apparent beneficial discontinuities in either of these index variables. The ratings of hypothetical scenarios appeared to be continuous, with about 1/3 of the average ratings for both measures falling between slightly agree and slightly disagree. This level of uncertainty and ambiguity makes training and effective use of punishment very problematic. It was also clear that across the 20 scenarios, there was a strong negative correlation between the 2 criteria. Scenarios that were judged as being hostile environments were not judged to be protected by academic freedom. Didn't the college claim that introduction of hostile environment protection would support and extend academic freedom? These are the raw correlations across respondents. As most behavioral scientists have learned, matters such as these are complicated, and many important variables are interrelated. However, at least as far as the Berea College campus is concerned, racial identity did not appear to be a significant factor. We highlighted the highest correlations. The perception of hostile environments is a key variable. Being female, identifying as a liberal and activist, and an explicit belief in the need for protection all predict increased sensitivity to hostile environments. The single highest correlation is the strong negative relationship between hostile environment sensitivity and academic freedom decisions. Those most sensitive to hostile environments were the least willing to grant academic freedom protection. Once again, the promise of hostile environment protection facilitating academic freedom appears to have been negated. Correlations measure relationships between 2 variables. However, multiple causation is ubiquitous in the behavioral sciences. This requires using a more advanced statistical procedure, multiple regression. Nearly a century ago, a junior faculty member at Harvard elaborated on an approach to using modified stepwise multiple regression equations to construct speculative models of relationships among variables. An important part of the path analytic approach is a hypothetical predictive flow. We used 5 predictive stages to sort the 9 survey variables. For example, we assumed that demographic variables might affect political identity, explicit beliefs, perceptions, and judgments, but that none of these variables would influence a respondent's gender, race, or sexual orientation. First question was what combination of the demographic variables best predicted political identity? Gender, sexual orientation, and their interaction were found to predict about a third of the variance in political identity. The bar graph on the right shows that heterosexual males are the outliers of the 4 demographic groups. Heterosexual males were less liberal than any of the other groups. Here are the results of the regression of the 3 explicit beliefs using political identity as a predictor. After political identity was considered, none of the demographic variables were significant. A liberal political view, an endorsement of activism, and explicit support for hostile environment protection all relate positively to one another. This is cognitive consonance. However, when the belief in academic freedom is added, dissonance appears. Subjects who endorse the need for hostile environment protection also endorse the First Amendment. However, a belief in activism was negatively correlated with endorsement of the First Amendment protection. This is cognitive dissonance. In predicting the index of perceptions of hostile environments, 4 variables contributed significantly to explaining over half the variance. Liberal women who endorsed activism and supported the need for hostile environment protection were more likely to perceive scenarios as being hostile environments. The final dependent variable was the index of judgments that activities described in the scenarios would be protected by academic freedom. In this case, the strongest predictor by far was the prior perception of the scenario as being a hostile environment. Respondents who perceived environments to be hostile were less likely to support academic freedom protection. Respondents' explicit assertions that the First Amendment was important also helped predict this judgment index, but only about 1/6 as much as the negative influence of the hostile environment perception. Here's a general model which combines all the previous analyses into a single hypothetical model predicting the index score for judgment of academic freedom protection. Published data from Berea College's Office of Institutional Research and Assessment suggests that the chilling effect of cancel culture has already diminished persistence for some groups of students and diminished overall viewpoint diversity. It's important to keep several caveats in mind. This was a mere classroom study to acquaint students with the value of adopting a scientific attitude and measuring variables before arguing about them. It was local and not designed to produce generalizable knowledge. With the Qualtrics anonymous response option, we received about 3 times as many applications for prize drawings as completed surveys, and even asking these questions was very upsetting to some portions of the campus community. Nonetheless, the 120 completed surveys provided a representative sample and the opportunity to identify important relationships among these variables. The belief that one should use their voice to suppress the expression of contrary views undermines liberal arts education. The absence of discontinuities in the perceptions and judgments suggests that Title IX training will be difficult. Differences between professed beliefs, perceptions, and judgments are a source of dissonance both for individuals and institutions. Pretending that such dissonance does not exist compounds the difficulties. If an institution promises to provide academic freedom, this must include protection even when the words are experienced or expected to be offensive to some members of the community. This presentation has been brought to you by Jennifer Fidela, Janae Davis, Aaron Clark, Yabsira Ayeli, and Dave Porter. On behalf of my students and myself, thank you.